Yes, guys, what's going on? Sham here from Be Real TV. Be Real Boxing now. But if you haven't done so already, head over to the main channel, youtube.com/Be Real TV. Plenty of podcasts on there. Please make sure you subscribe to both channels. So, this fight yesterday with Terence Bud Crawford and Errol the Truth Spence Jr. A lot of people were saying that this fight was a 50-50. Well, I did say that this fight, in my opinion, was not a 50-50. It's more closer to 70-30. And I don't really understand why people felt this was a 50-50 fight coming in. Let me explain why. When you were looking at the fight coming in, did you not see that Terence Crawford had lateral movement, that he had the punch selection, that he had the head movement, that Errol Spence is quite straight line and dominates his opponents with brute force? And I mean, he's got a good jab, he can keep a range, and I can see why people had Spence winning the fight. I can see that, but I really didn't feel that it was a 50-50. I did not feel it was a 50-50. I'm surprised by that. But then again, the bookies did have Crawford as the favourite. Now, did I expect for Terence Crawford to put on the clinical masterclass that he did? Absolutely not. No, I didn't. I was utterly shocked at how many knockdowns he scored in the fight. It was baffling to me that he was able to perform like that, because let me tell you, to perform like that against a quality operator in Errol Spence, who has ruled the welterweight division with an iron fist for many years now, it's unbelievable. Because, but then again, styles make fights as well. Like, who's there to say that if Terence Crawford did that to Spence, that he would have the ability to be able to do that to someone like Keith Thurman? Like, styles make fights, Manny Pacquiao, so on and so forth. So, but to do that to Errol Spence in the fashion he did it, it makes him the pound for pound number one, in my opinion. So let's break down the fight a little bit. So the way I see this is, Terence Crawford, he came out in round one, didn't really do much. He just basically saw how things were going. Then I believe it was in round two where he scored the first knockdown, right? I think it was round two. But he threw a left hand and he followed it up with the right hand. And this is something I want to first come on to. From the very opening bell, okay, no, not the opening bell, from the early stages of the fight, we could see that Crawford was hurting Spence with lead punches. Now, what do I mean by that? And I find this a bit quite bizarre, to be honest with you, because, you know, when you throw a lead punch normally doesn't carry power unless you really step to it. And Crawford seems to generate power from a very short distance, throws a punch, lead, bang. Kind of like Deontay Wilder can throw shots from awkward angles and just hurt the opponent. And I don't know where Terence Crawford has got this power from to be able to hurt opponents at 147 pounds in the fashion that he's doing. Very short, nothing loaded, weird angles. There's no sort of... there's nothing behind it that, looking at it, that you would think that's a knockdown punch. It's a very bizarre thing. And I know it's the punch you don't see coming that ultimately does the damage. But still, when you watch the fight back, it was insane. So let's go into the more detailed part of the breakdown, okay? So the thing is this. Errol Spence Jr., for me, when I was looking at the fight going in, and now looking at the fight at where it's at now, for me, personally, Errol Spence Jr. fights in straight lines. Now, I understand that Derek James teaches footwork to move around a little bit, but I never see Errol Spence moving laterally, like foot here, and then just moving around. I don't see that with Errol Spence. What I see more is a standard orthodox stance, and he tends to fight in straight lines, and he'll throw punches to the body very well, very precise with his punches. He is very active with his punches, and I could see like why people thought that he would cause Crawford problems. But where the difference lied for me leading up to this fight, which I mentioned in the pre-fight that I did on this channel, was that Crawford's got lateral movement, and I thought that that was critical in this fight. His lateral movement was critical because when Crawford was scoring the knockdowns and he was hurting Spence and tagging Spence, it was because Spence was shooting in the straight lines. Crawford would get him at just at the angle and hit him across in angles, and was fighting in this circular, Lomachenko does it as well, in this circular motion. Mike Tyson used to do it. Fight around you, hitting you in angles that you don't see. So it's like if you can pivot around your opponent will be attacking you face on like that. And then what Crawford will do, and great fighters tend to do, is they will use their footwork to go around the opponent and hit them, make you miss, go around, hit you at the angles. And that's really where I think the beginning of the problem started, because when you hit somebody at an angle, the opponent might not be square on, but you can make them square on. Because if you imagine, right, your feet are, if I'm fighting in the straight line here, I'm an orthodox fighter, or southpaw in Spence's case, yeah? You've got your right foot forward, left foot back. And if Crawford comes to, say, this left side and hits from here, my feet are like planted here, right? All of a sudden, if like you imagine now, you're facing that way there, you're then square on. And everybody who knows anything about boxing, if you are square on, i.e. your feet are like here and you're just facing forward, you will fall off balance. And the first knockdown was an off-balance punch. It connected Spence on the shoulder and hit him a little bit on the chin, I believe, and it caused that knockdown. And it was a lead, I think it was the lead, it was more of a jab. So a lead right-hand jab, yeah, I believe. So it's bizarre, but for me it was more the angle that he aimed at than the power, and I don't think it caused too much trouble. But as the fight went on, it started to become clear where, as great of a trainer as Derrick James is, he's an exceptional trainer, and I take nothing away from Derrick James. It became abundantly clear that there were holes and gaps in Derrick James's training philosophy. So let me explain what I mean by that. If you look at the pre-fight that I talked about, and you look at Derrick James, I mentioned that Derrick James has a philosophy, which I've used personally as well, and I do agree with it. I think it's very useful, that you should use your footwork as your defense. But here's the problem with that. Everybody knows that footwork in boxing is a very good line of defense. All the great fighters know this. Floyd Mayweather knows this. Terence Crawford knows this. Everybody knows this, who is a great fighter. Andre Ward knew this. Your feet are the best line of defense. However, there comes a time when your footwork is no longer serving you as an adequate defensive tool. So what do I mean by that? If you look at the fight between Spence and Crawford, Spence had the heavier feet. He was slightly slower on his feet. Crawford was quicker on his feet. And I mentioned all this in the pre-fight. With Crawford's quick footwork, he was able to beat Spence to the punch. And Spence didn't have quick enough feet to be able to move back in time to avoid the shots. And because he has a poor high guard on the way back, and I'm going to be honest with you, I actually thought Spence had a good high guard prior to this fight, but he actually doesn't. It wasn't that good. He kept keeping his hand low, and he wasn't able to block the way he did against Kell Brook. And maybe that's the accident. Maybe something disappeared in Spence. Maybe he was concussed early on in the fight. I don't know. Because when you're concussed and when you're having this sort of out-of-body experience in boxing, when you get hit hard, what happens is your mind disconnects to the rest of your body. So your arms can no longer be lifted to protect yourself. So I don't know if that was the case, but Spence was punching. He seemed like he wasn't in that sort of position, but for some reason he was struggling to just be able to block with the standard high guard. But Crawford didn't really need to attack the body that much. He was headhunting and viciously punching Errol Spence's face to a pulp. So it's like this. If you look at the fight, Crawford's footwork and foot speed was beating Errol Spence, and Errol Spence could have moved back in time. And also, he didn't have any other lines of defense. So he does not have a shoulder roll. He does not have head movement. And although he was trying in the fight to use head movement because the footwork wasn't working, he wasn't trained enough to use head movement. And if you haven't used head movement, like you don't use the pullback counter like Ali used to do, and you don't have that about you, against a fighter like Terence Crawford, where he's beating you to the punch, he's quicker than you, you're going to have a hard time. I really feel like a person who would have given Errol Spence a lot of problems would have been like, maybe a prime Pacquiao would have really given him trouble. Floyd Mayweather, in his, when he was fighting and active, would have given Spence a lot of trouble, because we see it now, because they're quick on their feet and they're fast. And I really feel like if you've got some speed against Spence and some decent pop, you will cause him some problems. That's not going to cause problems to Crawford, but it will cause problems to Spence. Quick feet, quick jab. I really feel that would cause Spence a lot of problems, and makes me think to myself, which other fighters are out there which are good enough, which have been good enough to have that quick feet, quick hands. And I can't really think of anyone of recent in the welterweight division, but I'm sure some will come to mind. But look, I don't want to go and completely criticize Spence over and over and over again. He's a great fighter, Spence. He is a great fighter. But for me, and my money, I thought it wasn't as 50-50 going in as many people thought. I couldn't understand why people had, I could give it to Spence, I can give it to Crawford. I don't think it was that sort of fight. I think Crawford was the favourite. And here's the other thing, right? When you saw Spence coming into the ring, did you notice on Spence's face? He seemed a little bit drained. He seemed a little bit tired. He seemed nervous. Crawford came in rolling with Eminem. And he was game, man. He was completely game. He was like, yo, let's go. And he jumped in the ring. He was composed. He looked fresh. He looked ready for it. Like this was his time. He was focused in. And this is the other thing. If you look at the two fighters, who has been in the more high-stakes battle? Crawford, let me tell you why. Crawford has fought for an undisputed title before and won it. He's a multi-weight champion. He's already been undisputed at 140 pounds, which was historic. Spence never has. So when you look at this fight, you have to understand that nerves come into it as well. And Crawford comes from Omaha, Nebraska, which is rough. Comes from a rough upbringing, which also makes you more resilient when it comes to these mental challenges and the mental side of boxing. And also in the weigh-in, I don't know if people noticed, but Errol Spence, he was talking about, we're going to make bank. When a fighter talks about money, done. It's done. Your objective should be money in boxing, but it should not be your focus. Say that again. Money can be a main objective, but it should not be your focus. What do I mean by that? In any area of business or work that you do, if you are obsessed with money and want to make the bag, you're going to jump from here to there to everywhere. You're going to do everything possible to make money, but you're not going to be able to focus and last because you're not willing to put in the hard work that it takes to become a success. Now, I'm not saying that Errol Spence is not putting in the hard work. Of course he is. But in boxing, especially, you need to have love for the game. Okay, you can't be obsessed with money, because money it takes your eye off the ball. If you want to be successful in boxing, you have to be obsessed with the craft of boxing. You have to be obsessed with learning boxing. The technical side, the fitness side, being the best version that you can possibly be in that squared circle, looking at other fighters, having a genuine passion for the sport. If you don't have that passion for the sport, you don't have that love for the technical side, boxing's not for you. At that point, you need to let it go. And Errol Spence said this in the weigh-in, that we're going to make bank. And Crawford was saying we're going to make history. Do you see how much of a difference that is in mentality there? So it's quite, there's quite a few intangibles going into the fight and looking back at the fight that you can truly see as to why Spence lost his fight. Not just lost, but lost in a clinical fashion. Now, I'm going to come on to some other stuff now. So let's talk more about, go into more details about the fight. So there was lateral movement, there was foot speed, it was all to do with the feet for me, okay? But also on the inside, when they were in the pocket, Crawford was able to block the shots in the pocket and able to throw with power, which was very surprising to me, because he seemed the stronger fighter in there, which is weird, because for my money, you don't really get much stronger hitters than Errol Spence, but that power just wasn't there. But the reason it wasn't there was because Spence was loading up on the shots, throwing himself off balance, and none of the shots were landing, and they were telegraphed. And I think he got away with it with lesser fighters because he would just absolutely outmuscle them, just seek and destroy. And when his jab got taken away by Crawford, it was difficult for Spence because he had no game plan B. If you don't have a game plan B and C, then you're in trouble. Then you are in real trouble, boy. Because if you can't switch it up, the other person's just going to keep beating you on your game plan A, and it's going to be easier and easier for him. And you have to have that mindset to be able to make an adjustment. And I don't think Spence made any adjustments in the fight. And I know it's easy to say sitting here, and I know it's difficult to implement in the ring, but Spence really didn't adjust. But the problem is, what would he do to adjust? He can't box Crawford on the back foot because Crawford is a superior boxer. So he went on the inside. So he tried on the inside, that didn't work, and I feel like you could kind of argue that was a game plan B. But then he should have shifted to game plan C, which was never done. And I think in all facets in that ring, in every department, Crawford had Errol Spence's number. Okay? Whether it was inside, okay, using that sort of Philly shell technique, right? Hitting, catching, close up, throwing, Crawford had his number. Whether it is on the outside, catching him over the top with the lead right hand, Crawford had his number. Whether it was the footwork, whatever it was, Crawford had Spence's number. Now, here's the thing about it. Crawford's taken this absolute beatdown. Spencer's taken this absolute beatdown. Crawford has dished out an ample amount of punishment to give Spence some serious concussion damage. Because in that post-fight interview, you cannot tell me that Errol Spence was about it, that he was saying that his brain was working in the correct fashion, because it wasn't. It really wasn't. And for my money, I think he needs a break. I think he needs to contemplate whether he wants to box again. I think his desire needs to be there. You cannot be boxing for money. That's not the reason. If you're boxing for money, it's not the game to do it. You'll get seriously hurt. And it's just not what you want to do. Because for me, Errol Spence looked like he was loading up on his shots. He looked like he was trying really hard. He did not want to quit. But he wasn't imaginative in the ring, and he wasn't on point in the ring. And I feel that the nerves of the fight got to Errol Spence as well. I'm not saying that's the sole reason. I'm saying it's a contributing factor. So, look, moving forward now, Crawford took him out in clinical fashion. I think the fight could have been stopped 1 or 2 rounds earlier. And I think everybody's just raving on about Terence Crawford. As far as I'm concerned, I think Crawford is an all-time great. He reminds me of Tommy Hearns. He hasn't got the levers of Tommy Hearns. He hasn't got the power in the right hand like Tommy Hearns. But he's got the demeanour of Tommy Hearns. And he's got other assets which remind me of Tommy Hearns. And for my money, it's going to be very difficult to beat Crawford. The way he stopped Kell Brook goes to show you that he's had some insane power for a significant portion of time now as Crawford. How he's carried up to welterweight, I don't understand it. I can't get it. But then, you've had other fighters like Roberto Duran who have had significant power moving up weight classes, so it's not impossible. But it's a difficult one, to understand how a person carries that sort of power up the weight classes. For my money, Crawford is now the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world. I think there's absolutely no doubt. I also feel that having great wins in Oyu, who is the #2 fighter at the moment, he's fighting in lower weight classes, and when you're fighting in lower weight classes, not much punching power, and the talent pool isn't as large as the larger weight classes. The reason being, there's not a lot of people who weigh 100. There's not a lot of men who weigh 126 pounds in the world, as much as there are people who weigh 147 pounds after they've lost all their fat and trained. So to be able to be dominant in the 147 pound division and become undisputed in one weight class and the second weight class, like Crawford has done, and beating the quality operator in Errol Spence, I just don't think Oyu compares with that. And I don't actually think that's close either. I think Crawford is a league above everybody in boxing right now. And this truly has become now the Terence Crawford era. But what is the next step? Well, the next point is now going to be, what is Errol Spence going to do? Well, he could reenact the rematch clause. Okay, now, I would heavily recommend, and I'm pretty sure Al Heyman will, that Spence should not engage that rematch clause. Because if he goes in there with Crawford again, he probably feels like he was weight drained, and fighters tend to find an excuse as to why they lost. There's always an excuse. The reality is that you weren't good enough on the night, and you probably won't be good enough again. That's the harsh reality, but sometimes reality doesn't kick in. But that's where Al Heyman comes in. He needs to advise Crawford that is not the thing to do. Because if he engages that rematch clause, he will get a whooping that, whether it's 147 or 154, Crawford will put that beating on Spence. Because truth be told, Spence wasn't landing any significant punches. He was missing most of his shots. He was loading up, trying to hurt Crawford, and it just was not happening. He was trying to hurt the body. He was doing the right things, to be fair. He was trying the right things. There wasn't much that there isn't too much that I could criticize what Spence was trying. There is some, but there's not loads. And I truly feel like Spence just will never beat Crawford. And also, I think you should be strongly considering retirement, because if you're fighting for the money, then truthfully, like I said, boxing ain't for you, and you need to call it quits. However, if he wants to fight, 154 pounds is the weight class. And I feel like he should take some light touches, fight some other guys. He's a draw in himself. He will remain a draw. And he needs to fight some guys at 147. 154. Maybe he takes on Keith Thurman at 154. There's Danny Garcia at 154 again. And there's other fighters at 154 who he could fight. But for my money, he needs to stay the hell away from Terence Crawford. Apart from that, okay, another thing which I want to jump onto before I forget. If he gets in the ring with Terence Crawford again, not only is he going to try and figure out the physical puzzle of how he cracks that code of Terence Crawford, because it's a complex mechanism. It's like a multifaceted Rubik's Cube. You're trying to crack it, but you can't crack it. And the thing is about Spence and Crawford is Crawford has now demolished Errol Spence. Crawford is a highly intimidating person. Spence seems like he's gone a bit softer mentally, especially after his car crash. He's got children. He's become a bit more civilized as Spence. And I don't think he's got the know-how, the capability to come back from a loss like that, figure out Terence Crawford, and then be able to commit to that game plan and actually execute it in the ring and beat Terence Crawford. I can't see that happening. I'm sure he feels there are things that he can do, but when it comes to it, it's not going to be able to be done. He's going to be too nervous and be scared of Crawford. Regardless of what anyone says, he will have fear of Crawford. Crawford is a highly intimidating individual, and after that vicious beatdown that he took, the embarrassment he's going to feel after calling himself the big fish and all this, it's just not, I don't feel it's the thing to do. It will end badly for Spence, but I don't think Al Heyman's going to advise him to do that. I think Al Heyman is going to take him to 154, rebuild him, and then later down the line, maybe they may have another fight. I doubt it, but they may. I think Spence is reaching the end of his career. I think that he's physically still able to fight, but I think his issue is he is mentally in a place where he just wants money now. And he's not in it for the love of the game. He's not in it to prove himself that he's a top quality operator and that he's the man. Give me a moment. Long drive. So, check this out. Terence Crawford. Charlo has the belts at 154, right? Easy work for Crawford. Easy work. If I was Crawford, I would do. I would challenge Canelo Alvarez. To explain why. That fight there, in my opinion, is a tremendous fight. I would favour Canelo, by the way. I'll explain why. Crawford will not be able to handle the punching power of Canelo Alvarez. You just would not. In a 12-round fight, Canelo would break Crawford's body down. Canelo has a much better defense than Errol Spence. He's fought on a higher level than Spence. And Canelo wouldn't be intimidated by Crawford. And I think Crawford's come along leaps and bounds, and I think at 160 pounds, I think Canelo would do a number on Crawford and win by knockout. I do not think Crawford would have the ability, the power to damage Canelo. I don't see it. Having said that, when you're as high of a level of a fighter as Crawford is, anything's doable. People are going to refer back to the Mayweather fight with Canelo. But no, this is a different Canelo, different weight class. But I think Crawford could potentially target that mega bout with Canelo Alvarez. But I think what he's going to do is he's going to target undisputed at 154 pounds, which is insane. Three weight classes. And I'll tell you something else as well. I cannot understand why they kept mentioning, oh, you're going to be the first male. Like, who gives a shit about the, like, not being disrespectful, right, to women, but Understand something. Women's boxing has nowhere near the talent pool as men's boxing because hardly any women box. If you were to count up all the males in boxing in comparison to females in the world, they'd probably outnumber them like 100 to 1, maybe more. So Claressa Shields is not on that level of Terence Crawford in terms of anything. It's just ridiculous, completely ludicrous. You can't compare women's boxings to men's. If you are a champion in men's boxing, you've had to come through and beat like millions of people in terms of like overall, not just rankings, but in the world. There must be millions of people boxing across the world. You're the number one in that weight class. That really says a lot about you. It's not the same for women. It's really not. So I don't know why they're comparing. It's ridiculous. All this equality bullshit. But anyway, look. The thing is, if you haven't done so already, go to Be Real TV. Make sure you subscribe on my main channel. Got plenty of podcasts. What do you guys want to see next from Terence Crawford, and what do you want to see from Errol Spence Jr.? Do you want to see this again? Leave your comments in the section below. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, and I'll hopefully be uploading a lot more content soon, guys. Thank you very much. Catch you all soon.